up at the end of
Yeah.
The Bliss Business Podcast, the show about empathy, connection, and consciousness in business. Today's episode is brought to you by Zero Company, your paid search, social media, and programmatic ad experts.
So my dog had this haircut, and it was just like really fat, fluffy body, but a really thin head. And then the top of the head was these spikes just going up. And my dog has not the greatest teeth, and so those were nicely featured. And I came home one day, I'm like, what the heck? So, yeah, that was like 5 years ago. And we kind of changed groomers right after that. Anyway, hey everyone, welcome to the show. I'm Steven Zakash, joined by Mike Lewski. Today we are joined by the CEO of one of the nation's largest pet retail chains, known not just for its extensive product offerings, but for its loyal customers and strong sense of community. And we are going to dive into community and connection today. Mike, introduce our guest.
Oh man, I'm excited to do this, Steven. Thank you for that. So with us today is Chris Rowland. He has over 30 years of experience in retail leadership, guiding organizations through customer-centric growth and operational excellence, which we know is something our audience is really interested in. Under his leadership, Pet Supplies Plus and Wag & Wash has expanded its footprint while maintaining its unique neighborhood feel, which we know is a huge challenge, and we'll hear more about that later in the show. So, Chris, it's a pleasure to have you with us today. Why don't we kick off, with a little bit about your journey? What led you into your current role? What inspired you to really focus on community building?
I spent, first of all, to get a little background, I watched my father work in a position in a plant for 35 years and hated going to work every day. And I always said to myself, if nothing else, I want to love what I do and do what I love. So I accidentally fell into retail, discount retail in Canada. And when business hit a bad spot when Walmart came to town, and at the same time PetSmart came to town. So they recruited me 27 years ago to work in a store in Toronto, and I was with PetSmart for 15 years. Kind of worked my way up the ranks to president of PetSmart Canada and Puerto Rico, and in charge of U.S. operations. So had about 1,500 stores under me when I left. But I left in large part because it is a large corporation. You really couldn't have the impact that you wanted to have, or I wanted to have, on the individuals and at the store level. All the things that we tried to do, everything was about making everything the same, make every store the same, make every experience the same, nothing unique. Where at Pet Supplies Plus, when I was recruited there, it was started out to be a franchise. They were looking at focusing on corporate, and they brought me in to try to change the focus and become corporate driven. That lasted about 90 days, and I went back to the board and said, I think we need to be franchise driven. We could really hit this local thing really well if we support franchisees. And in the pet industry, there's so much passion and emotion around it. It just wasn't being done well other than the local mom and pops. And that's, it's really hard to deliver value and the experience and all of the technology and all the things that we have at our disposal because of being a larger franchise. Luckily, at the time, the board agreed to it and kind of gave me a little bit of leeway to play, if you will. And fortunately for me, we put the foundation in place and quickly grew number one in our space almost overnight. It was 10, 12 years of consistent growth and year over year. So it's been a fun ride.
So you're thinking about those mom and pops when you're launching this. And you kind of know you have to be local and kind of community based, right? Is that kind of the focus? Why is that important for people to know in the retail space?
Well, I think about all the things I tried to do at PetSmart. And, we tried to do things locally. You want the stores to go out and connect locally. But at the end of the day, you want to keep your finger on a pulse of what's going on. Frankly, you want to keep them under your thumb and doing everything the way you want. And you can't, at the end, therefore, you can't do anything unique. You can't do anything local. God forbid somebody actually breaks out of the shell and comes up with a new idea. Where on franchising, my thought was, you have people that have been successful, have invested a lot of money in their business, and they want to put their their fingerprint on something. Well, they're probably not going to go out and buy merchandise. They're not going to run your technology department. They're not going to be marketing experts. What they really bought their store and what they really dreamt of doing is connecting with the neighbors that 3 feet in front of, with the neighbor in the aisle. And so the thought came, why don't we enable them to really do that well and unique and different, instead of trying to do 800 stores doing the same event on the same day every year, which is what I came from. It was, why don't we just enable them to do whatever they want in their community? And let's face it, what you do in Louisiana on a Saturday in November is probably very different than what you're going to do in New York City on a Saturday in November. So what sprung from that is really a lot of local creativity, local import. People started having a real passion for events and passion for their communities. And it just started that, flywheel going and just has continued. And it's probably been the number one reason that we recruit new franchisees is we tell them, you put your personal, we like to call it paw print on your store and make it your local store. All we're doing behind the scenes is enabling you to make that local experience come to life so that you're not bogged down trying to procure product or figure out the pricing. You're actually freed up to spend that time in the local communities and with your local team members, making that story come to life. And as a result, most of our neighbors, we call our customers neighbors, have no idea we're actually a franchise system at all. They think that local store is just a local store that has figured out how to run an amazing pet store with great engagement at great pricing. And frankly, they're blown away. So it's kind of a little secret that we're actually a franchisor and we have, over 750 stores out there.
Wow. I love that, because I would say that you lose that so quickly. And I love that your brand does that, because, brands that last are the ones that really develop that loyalty and that connection. People probably love to do business with you. So very interesting. Now, one question that kind of came up in my mind was around the issue of keeping that feel with scale, right? So with your natural reach, maintaining that local connection, as you stated, it might not be easy. So how do you balance that issue of trying to scale with staying true to the neighborhood feel?
It actually, when you think about it, it actually becomes easier. And the reason it becomes easier is as you have more stores, you have less ability to influence an individual store. True. And when you're not focused on trying to have everybody do the same thing, and all you're focused on are the tools to empower them. And then you have district team leaders that are out there basically saying, hey, here's how you use the marketing portal to go out and get your message out. Here's how you can bring in local product that you're passionate about in the merchandising portal. So what happens is we're so busy just training, mentoring, coaching, showing them the tools that are available. They're off doing their own thing. Then half the time, it's funny. I changed leaders in marketing a number of years ago. And part of the reason was the individual at the time wanted to kind of keep the stores under her control and wanted to say, well, what if they do something wrong? What if they use the brand in an improper way? And my answer was, well, what if they do something really cool and it goes viral and people start talking about it? I said, why are we worried about what they're going to do wrong? These are people that have invested in their stores. They're not going to try to hurt the brand. They're going to try to grow the brand, grow the awareness, grow their local store, all in positive ways. Now, could they make a mistake? Sure, we'll fix it. And the beautiful part about that is it's one store in one town in one market. It's not going to be a national problem anyway. So once we got our head around letting them have the freedom to do what they want, then they just started doing really cool things. And half the time we don't even know what's going on because frankly, it's not relevant. It's not relevant to the store down the street or the store in another state.
Oh,
Did you study?
I think that says a lot about your leadership. I appreciate you sharing.
Yeah, I was going to say, did you study like self-management principles and things like that for your franchisees, or did you just kind of this just feels right?
Actually, you know what probably helped me more than anything personally in order to get there, especially coming from an organization that was very much driven from top down. I went through a really tough divorce a number of years ago before I joined PSP. And I realized, especially when you go from having a wife to an ex-wife, You can influence, but you can't control. You can't force them to do anything they don't want to do. You're no longer a one household unit. So it became much more impactful to work together, became much more impactful to make suggestions and say, hey, what about this? Have you thought of this? And you quickly realize that most of the things, frankly, that the people debate or argue or get into conflict about at the end of the day, really don't mean much. And so once you can let that go and assume good intentions and assume somebody on the other end of the phone or on the end of the conversation is coming from a good place, it's a lot easier to accept what they're going to do or accept what they're going to say. And I'm very much, my philosophy has always been, I'm going to be unbelievably open and honest and direct. Now, that's not always a good thing. Sometimes, people don't like the message, but I'm always going to be honest about the message. I'm always going to be honest about the why and try to get them to understand at least where my head's at. Doesn't mean it's right, but at least they're going to understand my thought process. And then they're in a better position to be able to give me good feedback, positive or negative, based on the intent that I'm delivering the message. So that has served me really, really well with franchising. And then the other thing I would say is you quickly realize when you're dealing with somebody who's had a lot of success in life and has decided to become a franchisee, they don't want to be told what to do by anybody. They've said, I put real money on the line here. My kids' education's on the line. No offense. I'm a successful business person. I think I can run a pet store. So you quickly learn to trust their instincts. And then occasionally, it becomes much more of a partnership than a top-down leadership-driven culture, which I think at the end of the day has served us very, very well.
Yeah, I think I like that idea of the partnership. So you've kind of built this loyal following, not just with pet owners, but also with your franchise networks. And it's kind of because of that sort of partnership, right? With them. What do you believe draws people into just your overall ecosystem with your stores? Does it start from that partnership? And
it really starts from hiring. I say this all the time to people when they're looking to open their stores. You're going to put a sign on the building. It's going to say Pet Supplies Plus or Wagon Wash, and you're going to get people that come in and apply for a job. They don't apply for a job because they think they're going to make a ton of money in retail. They apply because they think, oh, it's a pet store. That should be kind of fun. And if it's not fun, 90 days later, what I tell them is you suck the fun out of it somehow. So you need to take a look from within and say, what did I do? Because these people came to you thinking it would be a fun place to work. I've been doing it for almost 30 years, and I can tell you it's still fun for me. So it starts with that. So when the neighbors come in, they want to know that the team members are having fun. They want to know that, the first and most important thing is obviously we have to have product on the shelves, and we try to do things to make the stores as simple to run as we can. We design them so they're as simple to run. We execute so it's simple to execute. But at the end of the day, we spend most of our time and energy on the culture. Most of our time is on engaging that team member who's face-to-face with the neighbors, whether it's through fun contests. I travel. When I travel stores, we have a chief bird officer. I used to bring the chief bird officer everywhere with me. She's a white cockatoo. And frankly, nobody wants to see me. They want to see the bird, and that's fine. And now I travel with a little French bulldog with me, Daisy. And again, same thing. They all want to see who the dog is, and then occasionally they'll say, oh, and who are you? But it's all about, engaging. It's all about celebrating success at the store level. It's about having fun with our stores. It's never a got you. It's never a, what did we screw up this week? That's just not, again, there's people in the organization who are focused on that. The rest of us are really there to support. And we try to hammer that message. The people we're supporting at the end of the day are our franchisees, our team members, and ultimately the neighbors that come in the store. Everybody else behind the scene, including my investors, they're at the end of the line. And I'm very clear with my board in every discussion we have and every strategy that we roll out, that this is about making the neighbor experience better, making our franchisees successful. And at the end of the day, this will trickle down and our investors will like the answer. It never starts with them. And I think after 12 years of doing this, everybody has gotten on board and understand that that is the only thing that matters. Everything else everything else will come from that.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't realize this sort of traditional business model. It's all aligned toward, that one stakeholder, the investor shareholder, when really, when you take on this bigger view of your community and your partners and, obviously your customers and all that, that usually feeds into good things for the investors on there. We've got a audience question. Let's run it. Let's see. What role have pets played in your own life, and how has it influenced the way you approach your leadership at Pet Supplies Plus and Wagon Wash?
That's a great question. It's funny, back in, I think the 4th or 5th grade, when you had to say, what do you want to be when you grow up? I wanted to be a veterinarian. So I always had pets. I lived on a small farm in Canada, and we had the normal pets, dogs, cats, hamsters, fish, the whole bit. But I also rescued, falcons and groundhogs and foxes, you name it, we had it at our house. My dad was a big animal lover, and he just passed it down. But I quickly realized I was really bad with chemistry and apparently not smart enough to be a veterinarian. Luckily, I was just smart enough to be a CEO of a retail store chain, so that it worked out pretty well. But pets have, I got my Frenchie. It took me a year to find her because she's going to be full grown. She's only about 16 pounds. And the reason for that was she travels everywhere with me, and you're maxed at 20 pounds on the airlines. So, you're pretty obsessed with pets when your sole focus is a small enough one that can travel everywhere in the world with you.
Nice. Yeah. Somehow the image of trying to fit it in the little luggage measuring thing
exactly
goes through my head.
So transitioning, Chris, a little bit, I want to talk a little bit more about the customer relationships, which I think for a local, business or in a neighborhood business is going to be critical. I'm sort of wondering, around building trust for those customers to have them long term. So obviously, like, relationships with those customers go beyond, what you just put on the shelves, because now, say with Amazon, right, you could get a product delivered to your door. So what strategies would you say the most effective for, building trust and having those long-term customer, connections or relationships?
So I think there's a number of things, but I think the first and foremost, one of the first things we did when I came on board is we collapsed our customer service team. We had the typical customer service team in the corporate office that answered all the calls and tried to resolve customer issues. And that seemed bizarre to me in a world where our customers are actually in the stores. Right. So our neighbors are the ones shopping. So we collapsed that down to a relatively few people that were just there to send the concerns back to the stores. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, the stores have to understand what the concerns are in order to be able to act on them and to fix the root cause of the problem. And it's interesting. Initially, I thought that would probably be the easiest thing we'd roll out. It was surprisingly difficult in the first couple of months, because we ran into some stores that said, why should I have to deal with this? And because in some cases, it's a pricing issue. In some cases, it's something that's, not necessarily under their control. Mm-hmm. But once you empower them and let them know that everything is in their control, and they can actually push this down to the individual store team member, you have surprisingly few negative concerns to deal with. So if somebody comes in and says, hey, so-and-so has a better price, instead of making them jump around trying to figure out how to prove it, you know what, take them at their word and give them the price override and move on. It shouldn't take an act of Congress. But most of the things we're human. We make a mistake. Somebody has a bad day. You drop the ball on something, or you're out of stock on something, but they're really easy things to fix at the point in time when the neighbor is in your stores. It becomes a bigger problem when they have to go home, find out who to call, address the issue, get a third party involved. They then have to get the store involved. When you think about it, it's like, this is a crazy system. Why are we doing this? Right. And now I will say the stores are unbelievably good at dealing with their neighbor issues. Our bonus incentives from the day I got in were based on customer experience. It was all about the experience in the stores. And I remember telling my board, look, the company was in serious financial straits when I got here. It was actually on the verge of bankruptcy. And I remember telling the board, give me a year at least before you get involved in my business. Like, just leave me alone and let me do what I have to do. And the first thing I told them is, I said, we're going to, regardless of the results of the business, we are going to pay the operators a bonus based on the experience. I said, now, I can't guarantee you I'm going to make any more money at the end of this year, and I will guarantee you I'm going to pay more bonuses. But what it's going to be is based on a behavior that we need to change. Luckily, they agreed, and we started that philosophy, and it's continued to this day, where most of their incremental pay is all based on what how the neighbor rates us and how they say we're doing. And frankly, the neighbor rules. And, again, culturally, it took a little time, especially with some of the franchisees that have been around a while. They don't have to adopt our compensation plans. But I'm, happy to say that 95+% of them now copy everything we do on the corporate side. They put in the exact same programs, exact same monitoring systems, exact same bonus programs, because frankly, it works. And what you got is you now have advocates at the store level advocating for the neighbors instead of, somebody in an office advocating for a neighbor. And then the other thing I did on the first week I was in with the company is we started conference calls with our field managers. The field managers are the ones that are in the trenches. They talk to the franchisees. They talk to the neighbors. They see when we don't have our finest execution. They see when maybe Pet Central, which is our corporate office, maybe has messed some things up. And so every Monday at 11 a.m. for the last 12 years, we get on a call with every single member of the field, including some senior store team leaders. So you have, probably 50, 60 people represented on that call, and every one of my senior team members. So every leader of every department is on that call. It's a live call, and you never know what direction it's going to go. It's all about 360 feedback. How did we do this week? Were the trucks on time? Were the products stacked properly? What concerns do you have on pricing? What concerns do you have on product? And the folks that can make the changes, make the decision, are on that call in real time. I'm on that call every week, and we hear it from the front line. And it's been unbelievably powerful to send the message that the only thing that matters is that our stores have answers, our stores are supported, and our stores are successful.
So it sounds like, from kind of right when you hit your job, you were focusing on that customer experience really from day one, from making those feedback loops get right into that local level. And really, both those things you tried, is that feedback loop, whether it's at that local store getting it or the 360 feedback that you're going, it's like, that sounds like the number one thing you did right to start. Is that correct?
Yeah, when I got on board, we were known as a discount pet store. Basically, it was all about how do you sell cheap cat cans and cheap cat litter and cheap dog food and stack it up and watch it fly. And I remember when I first started visiting stores and saying, okay, that doesn't work long term. That strategy is going to get beat by somebody. At the time, I didn't know Chewy was going to be right around the corner. But I said, this is not a hard strategy to beat. If you're only about price, you're gonna be in for a surprise here in the future. So I immediately turned it to be about customer engagement. And it was funny talking to some initial franchisees who thought I was crazy. They're like, why do you care? Nobody cares. They just want to save money on dog food. And I said, well, I disagree. I think if you actually look at the neighbor who shops in a pet store, they are passionate about their pets. They are emotionally attached to the pet. The pet went from the backyard to the back door to the bedroom to now in the bed, on the pillow. And if you're lucky, you get to join them. I said that.
And wearing a sweater. And
exactly. Celebrating birthdays. I said, if you don't understand that level of emotional attachment, this isn't about just saving money on cat cans. And so it took a couple of years to really get all the way through the organization. You have those fast followers, and then you have those that are going to wait and see. The good news is those that were waiting to see, saw the results of those that jumped on board very quickly, far surpassed them. And that's ultimately what caused them to say, I should probably jump into this.
Yeah, I think that makes a ton of sense, right? Because if you don't care for your pet, you're going to go to Costco, buy the biggest bag of pet food you possibly can, right? And it's just, cents on the for the ounce. But no, I totally applaud your approach, because for one thing, I always love to say, right, without a customer, we don't have a company.
Right.
And if we think about that, it rings pretty true. But I think a lot of what you're saying is important to this podcast. It's important to our audience around I know Tulio put in the chat, design thinking principles, but even that point of self-management, instead of, like you did with the customer, service department, allowing the stores to almost self-manage in a way, I think is, one really innovative and a good example of applying those self-management principles. So, Chris, I want to turn to speaking a little bit more about feedback.
Mm-hmm.
We talked a little bit briefly about that just at the beginning or before the show. So, what platforms, what approaches have you found to really be most effective in order to be able to get those insights out of the community? What tools do you rely on? Is it in-person experience? How do you go about it?
It's a mix. So, I mean, it's constantly evolving. When you think you've got something that works, it's time to probably change it. So the number one thing that has been consistent has been that 360 meeting on Mondays. That, regardless of anything else in the last 12 years, that's the one thing that has remained constant. We've never missed one. Frankly, even in the holidays, you say, let's get together because, we still want to hear from the stores and it might be a little bit shorter, but that's the most important. We do surveys with our franchisees where they're blind. They can tell us whatever they think of us, good, bad, or indifferent, because at the end of the day, it's not about who said what, it's about what was said. And we consistently beat the franchise community as a whole in terms of the results. And one of the top scoring areas is enjoys the organization and feels an active participant in the organization. And that doesn't necessarily mean they run their store. It means that they feel like they can talk to whoever they can talk to. So every single franchisee in our chain, and it drives my team always gets a little stressed when I'm on my conference calls or town halls with all of our franchisees. We'll have a few hundred people on a call and we'll go through our presentation. And inevitably at some point in that call, I'm going to say, hey, look, if anybody has any concerns, here's my cell phone number. Call me anytime. And they always like, why do you do that? I said, because you know what? I'm like the Maytag repairman. If we do the job right, they're not going to call me. And if we don't do the job right, then why wouldn't I want to hear from them? I mean, there are levels in the organization. There are levers and there's levels in the organization that they can pull to get their answers. There's a district team leader that's in their store every month. There's a regional manager that's touching base every quarter. And there's a senior vice president that calls every store every year and talks to the franchise owner personally. And she visits the store. She probably spends over 300 days a year on the road. I said, if they don't get an answer and if they go through the process and they call their district manager, regional, and the senior vice president, they don't get an answer, why would I not want to take their call? I mean, that's crazy to me. And at the end of the day, I don't get very many. And when I do get a call, the funny thing is 9 times out of 10, it's a call to say, I just want to say, we think your team's doing an amazing job. I know you probably, only hear negatives. And I always laugh and I go, actually, it's not true. I don't hear a lot of negatives because I have really passionate people that try really hard. And even when we make a mistake, we're very quick to apologize. We're very quick to say this was our bad. I don't find spending a lot of time on PR to try to clean up a problem is worth the time, effort, or energy. I'd rather just be very transparent. So it's really mostly direct feedback. And then ultimately my team is out in the stores a lot. I try to visit stores frequently. And again, it's never an audit of the store. It's always, what can we do better? What have we screwed up? What can we do better? And it's funny because the store team leaders, when you're with them directly, they're always, expecting somebody to, when you tour the store, to tell them what's wrong. And I always say, your store looks great. Even if I see something I think, is a little bit off, I'm not going to talk to them. I mean, at the end of the day, their district team leader is all over it. We'll get in the car and I'll say, hey, did you notice? And they're like, yeah, here's the story. Boom, boom, boom. I was like, yeah, I knew you would be all over it. I mean, I don't want the visits to be about that. I want the visits to be their opportunity, for lack of better words, as a scorecard of how my team at the corporate office is doing, not the other way around. Because I think far too often in life, the people, as you go down the ladder, for lack of better words, from the leadership down to the folks that actually do the work, I think far too often they feel like everybody's criticizing them and they're not allowed to criticize upwards. So I would much rather give them as many vehicles as possible to let them know that you actually have a voice. And I am very interested in hearing how we're doing.
Yeah.
I like that a lot. So if you're talking to someone, say they've got their own retail chain or starting a retail chain, really, we've talked about kind of how community has been just a huge competitive advantage for you, right? What kind of impact has that had on the bottom line too? I mean,
it's funny what I tell people all the time, especially, we have meet the team days every month. So I meet every prospective franchisee before they become a franchisee. So I spend an hour and a half with every one of them and kind of give them the philosophies around the business, let them know what they're signing up for, let them know that, look, you're going to meet all of the senior team. You're going to know exactly who you're putting your money behind and who's going to help you drive your success, because I think that's important. I don't think it should be a surprise. And I think, if you're going to put $1 million+ down on a business, you should probably know who the people are you're partnering with. So that's incredibly important. But the other thing I tell people all the time is, look, retail is tough. I mean, I'm not going to, sugarcoat. It is a whole lot harder than it was 30 years ago, 35 years ago when I first got into this. You have to, people say they want to shop local. And I always say, well, do they? They want to shop local, but they still want the best price. They still want the best service. They still want the most convenient. So that's why we have same day delivery. We'll deliver your products for free within a few hours. It's, Chewy will deliver within 2 or 3 days. We'll deliver same day. We'll match anybody's price. We're priced very competitively against all of our major competitors. We're slight savings to most. But at the end of the day, people want the best service at the best price with the most convenient. So retail is a lot harder, and you do kind of have to deliver on most of those pillars. I don't believe a lot of people shop local just because they got good service. They're not going to go in and say, I'm going to pay twice as much for the exact same product I can buy online because I was greeted. And in our case, we carry out bags of dog food, 30 pounds or more, to the car still. When we do an online order, we send you a handwritten thank you note, put it in the bag. So I think you have to provide a really good service, and then you have to figure out how to take it above and beyond. And in our case, that local is the above and beyond. That's where we get out to the local communities and get involved in dog parks and car washes and all those things so that people can put a name to a face. And it's not just this blank marketing that hits your doorstep every month. There's a good chance they're actually going to run into you. And I love when our franchisees share stories with me, whether they're at I hear some great stories where franchisees are handing out coupons at either at holiday events, or I love when they go to beer tents. I think that's always, most companies would be like, you're doing what? And I have franchisees that, I like to drink beer and I like to hang out with people. So I hand out my business card and I hand out coupons for my pet wash. And I think, you know what? I mean, they're your shoppers. Why wouldn't you do that? Now, hopefully you don't drink too many and go crazy, but that's a whole different issue. But that's, I think that's important. And I just think whatever business you're going into, you got to figure out what it is you're going to win on, but you still got to place and show on those key metrics that drive retail.
Yeah, that'd be key. That's an interesting way, for sure, to reach customers. So Chris, talking, I guess, a bit more about reaching, I guess a twofold question for yourself, and the franchise, who is it that you're really looking to, reach as a franchisee? And then I'm also curious, what do the local franchises do sometimes to try to reach, their audience?
So we have a really flexible model. We have franchisees that have over 60 stores as a partnership, and have, district team leaders and all kinds of things. We have a lot of individual mom and pops that run stores. A lot lately have been, parents looking for a business they can pass on to their kids that maybe are looking for, I find now that today's generation is much more interested in following their passion. And so parents are trying to find something that their kids are passionate about. And guess what? A lot of them are passionate about pets. But so we have owner operators that run their stores, and we have investors that invest in stores and then hire really passionate operators that become the face of the store. What I tell the investor side is, if you're going to run multiple stores and you're going to be behind the scenes, make sure who's ever running your store feels empowered to be that store, the face of your store. Don't try to be the face of your store living in one state, running a store in another. That's not the model. So the good news is they really embrace that. And whether it's a minor ownership stake, or whether it's bonus tied to it, or whether they just simply say, it's your store, run with it, and I'm here to help you if you need me, I find it works really, really well. In terms of other, we're attracting lately a lot of quick serve franchisees that are looking for a change. The quick serve business is, it's no joke these days. I mean, it's harder to get staff. Like we don't really ever have problems staffing our stores. We don't use major portals to do recruiting and things like that. We put a sign up and say, hey, we're hiring. And for the most part, we have no problems. I have over 200 corporate stores. And I think right now for store team leaders, I might have 3 or 4 openings total. I mean, most of our store team leaders have been with us for north of 8-9 years. Our district team leaders have been north of 15 years. I mean, we have a lot of longevity in the company. People truly do love working for us, and they stay working for us, and they work their way up the chain. And that's another thing we really heavily focused on. We used to, when I first got here, we tried recruiting, and that didn't really work so well. So then we doubled down on, let's just have a clear path of how do you go from a receiver or a cashier to a key holder, to an assistant manager, to a manager. And actually those manager ranks are where we get most of our district team leaders from. So we do a lot of internal recruiting, and that helps to build the culture and keep that cycle going.
Chris, this has been a great discussion. Before we wrap up, I like to ask this question to all our guests. And I know you kind of answered it at the very beginning of the show, but what do you say to those who say love doesn't have a role in business?
That's so I get back to my point with my dad, watching him slug off every day, even though we grew up very, very poor. He didn't feel he could change jobs because he was worried, what if he couldn't find one, and how was he going to pay? He had 5 boys. How was he going to feed his 5 boys? And I just remember him, all he talked about is, one day, I can't wait to retire. I can't wait to retire. And I said, I can't do that. I joined General Motors straight out of college, stayed there for about 90 or 120 days. And the culture was so toxic that I said, I can't do, I'm my dad all over again. And so I went to retail and took a 60% pay cut to start in retail. My dad thought I was insane. He goes, you worked your way through college to end up back in retail. What is wrong with you? And I said, you know what? I just got to do what I love. And I know it doesn't pay well, but I really like going to work every day. So I do think do what you do. Love what you do what you love is incredibly important. It's something I stress with my kids. It's something I stress with our team members all the time. I say, look, I can, if even in something like in the corporate office, I can't make you love accounting, but I should be able to make you love being an accountant at Pet Supplies Plus. That's my job, but I can't cause you to love to do something that you hate doing. So first it's recruit people that kind of love the industry you're in. And then how do you help to support that and not, for lack of better words, put out their flame?
I love that so much. Thank you for sharing your journey and your insights on to building a thriving community. To our listeners too, thank you for tuning in to the Bliss Business Podcast. Be sure to follow us for more episodes and future leaders. And we are looking forward to seeing you next time on the Bliss Business Podcast.